Steve Magnante is a name beloved by car enthusiasts around the world. Known for his boundless knowledge of automotive trivia and his energetic on-screen presence, Steve made his mark as a commentator at the famed Barrett-Jackson collector car auctions and as a host on Motor Trend's automotive shows. With his signature enthusiasm and depth of expertise, he has spent decades bringing car history to life, whether crawling through junkyards in search of hidden gems or providing live commentary on some of the world's most valuable collector cars. Fans know him as the walking encyclopedia of hot rod facts, always ready with a fascinating story or technical insight about any car that crosses his path. But beyond the television personality, Steve Magnante's journey is one of lifelong passion for cars. Forged from humble beginnings and, more recently, defined by a courageous fight for his health. Born Stephen Prasak Steve Magnante in July 1964, Steve grew up far from the automotive industry, in a family that had no special interest in cars. His father was an optical physicist and his mother a graphic designer, hardly the typical upbringing for a future gearhead. Yet from an early age, Steve's love for all things automotive was unmistakable. As a little boy in Massachusetts, he became infatuated with toy cars, starting with Matchbox and Hot Wheels. By age 10, he graduated to building 1/25-scale plastic model car kits, carefully assembling miniature Chevys and Fords. These models fueled his imagination and deepened his understanding of automotive design. By the time he was a teenager in the late 1970s, Steve's fascination turned to real cars. He spent his high school days admiring the used muscle cars of the 60s and early 70s that were cheap and plentiful at the time, dreaming of owning one himself someday. Steve's chance to own a muscle car came in the 1980s, but not without a little secret. In 1986, after graduating from Clark University, he received a small inheritance from his grandmother. He told his parents he'd put the money in the bank, but in truth, Steve used it to buy his first high-performance car, a partially restored 1968 Dodge Charger RT with the legendary 426 Hemi engine. This big orange Mopar, one of only 463 Hemi Chargers built with an automatic transmission, became Steve's pride and joy. He experienced the thrill of V8 power in that Hemi Charger, feeling like a hero as he roared down the streets, the solid lifter cams clattering in his ears. Owning such a rare muscle car taught young Steve an important lesson. As much as he loved pushing the Charger to its limits at the drag strip and on the street, it was a piece of history too valuable to ruin. He eventually sold it for a profit, without his father ever knowing the truth about the savings account, and used the funds to pay off student loans and build a less precious hot rod he could really enjoy. This pattern, buying, building, and sometimes selling cool cars, would continue throughout Steve's life, each project adding to his hands-on automotive education. To support his car habit, Steve embarked on a career squarely centered on automobiles. In his early years, he worked a variety of car-related jobs, pumping gas and turning wrenches at a local service station, wrenching on British sports cars at a restoration shop, selling Chevrolets on a dealership floor, and even co-owning a small mail-order model car business. By 1991, Steve felt he needed a bigger arena for his talents and drove across the country to Los Angeles in search of opportunities in the automotive media. He arrived in California in a beat-up Plymouth Volare wagon packed with his belongings, and promptly started hustling at auto swap meets, selling old car magazines to make ends meet. His break in media came when he landed a job as an associate editor for Chrysler Power magazine. That led to freelance writing gigs for titles like Mopar Action, Muscle Mustangs and Fast Fords, and Popular Mechanics. Steve's engaging writing and deep technical knowledge were his calling card. And before long, he achieved a personal dream. In 1997, he was hired as a technical editor at Hot Rod magazine, the Bible of performance car culture. During 7 years on staff at Hot Rod, Steve wrote countless articles and got to collaborate with many of the industry's legends and veteran writers he'd idolized. It was also at Hot Rod that Steve got his first taste of television. He became a regular on Hot Rod Magazine TV, where his segments often took viewers on what he dubbed junkyard crawls. Armed with a camera crew, Steve would wander through Southern California wrecking yards, excitedly uncovering old cars and parts and explaining their historical significance. These segments were a hit with viewers. Steve's genuine curiosity and encyclopedic memory made even rusty wrecks sound fascinating. This on-camera experience, combined with improv comedy classes he had taken in Hollywood for fun, helped Steve develop a charismatic, quick-thinking TV presence. By 2005, Steve Magnante was ready to move from magazine deadlines to full-time broadcasting. That year, a twist of fate launched him into what would become his most famous role. He was invited to join the TV broadcast team for the Barrett-Jackson collector car auctions, filling in for another commentator on short notice. The Barrett-Jackson auctions, which air live, are high-profile events where hundreds of specialty cars cross the block in front of an enthusiastic crowd. Steve jumped in with his homework done, literally carrying a stack of handwritten notes on every car in the docket. His depth of knowledge and never-ending enthusiasm won over producers and viewers alike. From that point on, Steve Magnante became a fixture of Barrett-Jackson broadcasts, providing color commentary and technical insights on everything from vintage muscle cars to one-of-a-kind customs. If a rare classic had a unique backstory or a numbers-matching engine, Steve would passionately share those details. Viewers came to love his catchphrases and the way his face lit up whenever an unusual hot rod or barn find rolled on stage. Over the years, Steve also hosted and appeared on various automotive TV shows, from DIY Network's Classic Car Restoration to the History Channel's Rides Reunited. Most notably, he continued chasing his passion for old-school drag racers and junkyard treasures on Motor Trend's Roadkill's Junkyard Gold, a show that spun off of the popular Roadkill series. In each episode, Steve would scour salvage yards to unearth forgotten muscle cars and oddball automotive relics, reveling in their potential. By the late 2010s and early 2020, Steve Magnante had truly done it all in car culture media. Magazines, television, YouTube, you name it. He also authored books on automotive trivia and model kit building. Through it all, he remained the same friendly car nerd from Massachusetts, thrilled to share knowledge with fellow enthusiasts. Little did anyone suspect that in 2023, Steve's accelerating career would come to a screeching halt due to a sudden and terrifying health crisis. In mid-2023, fans began noticing Steve's unexplained absence. He stopped posting his usual YouTube videos and was missing from Barrett-Jackson's televised auction events. This was highly unusual for someone so consistently active in the car scene. Viewers and colleagues grew concerned as weeks turned into months with no sign of Steve. Rumors started to circulate on social media and automotive forums. Something was wrong. Some wondered if he had quietly left Barrett-Jackson or if he was dealing with a private personal issue. As the normally bustling Steve Mag's YouTube channel went quiet and Steve was absent from the Barrett-Jackson auction block, concern among the automotive community only grew. It was as if a familiar engine had suddenly stalled on the road, leaving everyone who cared about Steve waiting anxiously for news. For a time, details were scarce. Steve's close friends and family kept things private while he was in the thick of a medical emergency. But by early autumn 2023, the sobering truth emerged. Steve Magnante had been struck by a serious health emergency that summer. During what should have been a routine day, Steve began experiencing intense back pain, dizziness, and extreme dehydration. He went to see a doctor, expecting perhaps a diagnosis of heat exhaustion or a pinched nerve. Instead, tests revealed a much more alarming condition, swelling in his brain. Steve was immediately admitted to the hospital, and it became clear he was suffering from encephalitis, a rare and life-threatening inflammation of the brain. Practically overnight, this vibrant car expert was fighting for his life, and he soon slipped into a coma as his body battled the severe infection. Encephalitis can have various causes, but in Steve's case, doctors traced it partly to an old physical injury that had come back to haunt him. Years of bending over car engines and hauling heavy car parts had given Steve chronic back problems. It appears that a decades-old back injury compounded by severe dehydration triggered a cascade of complications that led to the brain infection. The illness hit hard and fast. Steve's condition in the hospital was extremely critical. He had to be placed on a ventilator to keep him breathing, and underwent a tracheotomy, a surgical airway in the throat, during his treatment. Weeks passed with Steve unconscious and reliant on life support, while doctors and loved ones hoped and prayed for his recovery. This sudden, devastating turn of events was a shock to everyone who knew Steve as the energetic car encyclopedia on TV. Now, instead of exploring junkyards or chatting about horsepower on stage, he was in an intensive care unit, waging the toughest battle of his life. Miraculously, Steve pulled through the worst of it. After spending a long period in a coma in intensive care, he eventually stabilized and regained consciousness. But the ordeal was far from over. Months of difficult rehabilitation lay ahead. In late 2023, Steve was moved to a physical therapy hospital to begin the slow process of reclaiming his strength and cognitive abilities. He had to relearn basic things most of us take for granted. At first, he was confined to a wheelchair, unable to walk on his own after so much time in bed. With the help of physical therapists, he gradually began to stand and take steps again. The road to recovery was arduous, a journey of small victories, like moving from wheelchair to walker, from walker to unassisted steps. Throughout this time, updates trickled out sparingly, often via close friends or brief social media notes, simply stating that Steve was on the mend. It wasn't until Steve himself was able to speak publicly that fans finally heard the full story of what had happened. While Steve focused on healing, the car community he had given so much to over the years sprang into action to support him. News of his plight spread quickly among automotive circles. Friends, colleagues, and fans around the world were determined to help Stevie in any way they could. The hot rodding and collector car community is a tight-knit family, and now one of their own was in dire need. Not only was Steve facing a long rehabilitation, but the financial toll of his medical emergency was staggering. Months in the hospital, specialized treatments, and therapy, all without Steve being able to work, meant the bills were piling up fast. In fact, it soon became clear that this medical crisis was threatening to wipe out Steve's finances. To make matters worse, he initially tried to shoulder the burden alone. As he became lucid and learned of the costs, Steve quietly began selling off some of his cherished possessions to raise money. He even put up for sale his famous project car, a wild, funny car-style Ford Fairmont he had spent years building, along with other automotive memorabilia and even his house. It was a heartbreaking sign of how desperate the situation had become. When fans and friends discovered that Steve was selling his beloved cars and assets to pay medical bills, they knew they had to intervene. The community essentially said, "No way are we going to let this happen to the man who has given us so much joy and knowledge." Online forums and social media lit up with supporters brainstorming ways to assist Steve. Many called for organized charity events, while others suggested setting up a donation fund. At the grassroots level, car clubs talked about passing the hat at local meets. Steve's former colleagues from Hot Rod magazine and hosts from Motor Trend spread the word as well. Barrett Jackson, the auction company where Steve had become a household name, also quietly offered help behind the scenes. Longtime Barrett Jackson teammates, people like fellow commentator Christian Murphy, joined the effort to ensure Steve wasn't alone in this fight. Christian Murphy, a fellow on-air talent and close friend from the broadcast team, helped coordinate support and kept the community informed about Steve's progress. Even though Barrett Jackson as a company didn't make public announcements about it, they and many individuals associated with the auction made generous contributions to aid Steve's recovery. Ultimately, the rallying cry from fans was that they wanted to help directly. Thousands of people who had enjoyed Steve's work over the years felt personally invested in his recovery. Responding to this outpouring, Steve's family and friends set up an official GoFundMe campaign in late May 2024 to accept donations for his medical expenses. The response was overwhelming. Enthusiasts from around the globe, from fellow gearheads and former co-workers to people who only knew Steve through TV, opened their hearts and wallets. In just a matter of weeks, the GoFundMe blew past expectations, approaching the ambitious goal of $500,000. Over 7,000 individual donations poured in, ranging from small contributions to very large gifts. Fans left thousands of messages thanking Steve for inspiring them and wishing him strength in his recovery. The $500,000 goal, an amount that initially seemed daunting, was effectively reached through this incredible groundswell of support. It was a testament to how widely loved and respected Steve Magnante is. The man who had always shared his knowledge freely now saw that generosity returned by an entire community. As Steve's condition improved, he became aware of the tremendous support flowing his way. Imagine waking up from a nightmare to find out that thousands of people, many whom you've never met, have been rooting for you and even donating their hard-earned money to help you get better. It's hard to fathom, and Steve was deeply moved by it. In mid-2024, after months of silence, Steve Magnante finally addressed the public in an emotional video message posted to his YouTube channel. Speaking directly to the camera from the rehabilitation facility in Massachusetts where he was recovering, a visibly grateful and humbled Steve shared his story and his thanks. The video was heartfelt and unpolished. Steve even joked that he was coming to you kind of live from a physical therapy hospital, but the mood quickly turned sincere as he expressed how overwhelmed he was by the support. In the message, Steve confirmed the rumors about his health scare. He candidly described how encephalitis had blindsided him and nearly cost him his life. He spoke about the surreal experience of losing months of his life in a coma and waking up to discover the world had changed around him. Steve didn't shy away from the tough details. He mentioned the ventilator, the tracheotomy scar on his throat, and how he had to relearn to walk. At one point, his voice trembled with emotion as he acknowledged just how lucky he felt to have survived. For a man usually so talkative and quick with a quip, this was a moment of raw honesty and vulnerability. Most importantly, Steve used the video to directly thank everyone who had supported him. He made a point to thank his friends in the industry who had stepped up, the crew at Barrett-Jackson, including producers and fellow commentators like Christian Murphy, Rick DeBrule, Mike Joy, and others who had been there for him. He extended heartfelt gratitude to Barrett-Jackson's leadership, as well, noting that the company had indeed helped him quietly and substantially, even if they chose not to publicize it. Steve addressed some online chatter head-on, explaining that Barrett-Jackson had provided assistance behind the scenes, countering any notion that they'd left him behind. He thanked his old Hot Rod magazine buddies and the broader Motor Trend family, many of whom had rallied the troops for him. But Steve reserved his deepest appreciation for the fans, the everyday car lovers whose kindness stunned him. In the video, he emotionally acknowledged every person who donated, prayed, or sent encouraging messages. "You saved my life," he said plainly, tears in his eyes. He admitted that words failed to fully capture how grateful he was for the flood of goodwill. Steve has always been known for talking non-stop about cars, but here he paused, visibly choked up, trying to convey what the support meant to him and his family. It was clear that the financial help not only eased his burden, but also lifted his spirits at a time when he could have easily fallen into despair. The knowledge that he had such a huge, extended family pulling for him gave him motivation to work even harder in therapy and get back to doing what he loves. Viewers who watched this thank you video could feel the sincerity and emotion. It wasn't just an update. It was Steve's way of reaching out to hug the whole community that had effectively carried him through a dark time. In an era where online fundraisers sometimes feel impersonal, Steve made sure this one was anything but. He wanted everyone to know that every donation mattered, and every good wish helped him heal a little faster. It was an incredibly uplifting moment for his supporters as well. They finally got to see with their own eyes that their friend was awake, alert, and on the road to recovery. And they got to hear directly from him how much their love had meant. In the same video and subsequent updates, Steve provided insight into his recovery progress and the realities of the road ahead. By this time, mid to late 2024, he had made significant strides, but was frank that recovery from a brain injury is not like flipping a switch. It's an ongoing journey. He shared that while he was out of immediate danger and improving, he wasn't simply back to normal. Encephalitis, he explained, isn't an illness that just vanishes. Even after treatment, it can leave lasting neurological effects that one has to manage for life. In Steve's case, he mentioned that his doctors told him to think of recovery as a marathon with no clear finish line. There might not be a single day where he's all better. Instead, it's about continuous healing and adapting. Steve did note that his cognitive functions and memory, the mental toolbox of car facts and history he's famous for, survived the ordeal, much to his relief. He quipped that he still remembered plenty of useless facts about carburetors and camshafts. However, he also acknowledged having some lingering challenges, such as occasional fatigue and the need to rebuild muscle strength and endurance after so long being immobile. It was evident that Steve was approaching these challenges with the same determination and positive attitude that defined his approach to cars. One piece of his recovery that Steve was particularly emphatic about was the importance of staying mentally and physically active. He revealed that part of his therapy was simply getting up and moving, not only for his body, but for his brain. This kind of recovery doesn't have a finish line, Steve said in one update. So you do things to keep your brain moving. True to his word, he was literally moving. Steve made it a habit to walk several miles every day, as soon as he was strong enough. He started with short walks and gradually built up to walking 2, 3, and then 4 miles each morning. These long walks served a dual purpose, rebuilding his physical stamina and also giving his mind a daily workout, observing the world around him, listening to audiobooks, or simply organizing his thoughts as he strode along. For someone who spent years roaming junkyards, taking a walk is more than exercise. It's a return to exploring, one step at a time. In addition to walking, Steve mentioned doing puzzles and reading to keep his mind sharp. There's a real risk with neurological conditions that if you don't use it, you lose it, and Steve was intent on not letting his intellect or memory atrophy. He treated his brain like a muscle car engine that needs to be fired up regularly to stay in tune. His updates often included these little personal triumphs, walking a bit farther than the week before, climbing stairs again, or remembering the name of a car part that had eluded him during recovery. Each was a milestone on his road back. After facing down death and spending a year rebuilding his health, most people would consider taking it easy. But Steve Magnante isn't most people. As he often says, he needs to keep his brain busy, and nothing makes him feel more alive than pursuing his automotive passions. So, what's next for the indefatigable Steve Mags Magnante? In his own words, it's getting back to doing what I love for as long as I'm blessed to do it. Even while recuperating, Steve couldn't stay away from the world of cars for long. As soon as he had enough strength and doctor's clearance, he returned to creating content for his fans. In early 2024, while still in recovery mode at home, Steve restarted his YouTube channel content with renewed zeal. He cleverly adapted to his temporary physical limitations by focusing on topics he could handle from his home workshop. For instance, he kicked off a special Wagon Week series on his channel, where he showcased and told stories about vintage station wagon model cars and collectibles from his personal collection. Filming right in his own garage, he brought out items like a 1957 Chevy wagon promotional model and regaled viewers with their history. These videos prove that Steve hadn't lost a step when it came to storytelling. His passion shone through the screen just as brightly as before, even if he was speaking a bit more slowly or appearing a bit thinner than fans remembered. Each upload was a small victory, signaling that Steve was truly back in the mix, doing what he does best. As his strength grew, Steve hinted at and then began tackling bigger projects. By mid-2024, he was venturing out to local car shows and swap meets again, not as an active participant just yet, but to soak in the atmosphere and reconnect with friends. Just being back in that environment of revving engines and sun-baked swap meet tables was therapeutic. He even filmed a few junkyard crawl-style segments at a slower pace, visiting a friend's salvage yard in a controlled way to test the waters. "I'm not quite ready to jump into a full-blown junkyard expedition," he laughed in one update, "but I can't resist a peek at some rusty gold when I get the chance." It's clear that as soon as he's physically able, Steve plans to resume his famous junkyard adventures. crawling under old cars with a camera in hand. And with his wiser approach to hydration and lifting, he'll be doing it more carefully this time around. On the professional front, Steve has expressed a strong desire to return to the Barrett-Jackson auction block, the place that has been like a second home to him for nearly 2 decades. He's kept in close touch with the Barrett-Jackson team, and they've been publicly cheering on his recovery, eager for his return whenever he's ready. While he understandably missed some auction broadcasts during his treatment and rehabilitation, there is optimism that we will see Steve back on live TV at a Barrett-Jackson event in the near future. Whether it's Scottsdale, Las Vegas, or another venue, the day Steve Magnante picks up the microphone again to describe a car's engine swap or factory options will be a triumphant moment not just for him, but for all who supported him. His knowledge and enthusiasm are simply irreplaceable, and his colleagues have said as much. There's a seat waiting for him whenever he feels up to it. Steve has hinted that he's aiming to be back in action as soon as he can safely handle the travel and long hours, and he's been training for it like an athlete preparing for a comeback match. Apart from TV and online content, Steve is also channeling his energy into personal projects. During his recovery, he had plenty of time to think, and he hasn't wasted that opportunity. He's been jotting down ideas for future books, possibly a memoir-style account of his health journey, intertwined with his car adventures, or a new volume of fascinating car facts that he's accumulated. He's also been organizing and restoring some of the cars in his own collection that sat idle while he was ill. Working with his hands again on his project cars carefully and with any necessary help to avoid heavy lifting has been both rehabilitation and joy. Those close to him say that getting a little grease under his fingernails again did wonders for Steve's morale. Looking ahead, Steve Magnante's goal seems simple yet profound: to remain healthy, to continue sharing his love of cars, and to give back to the community that gave so much to him. He often mentions that he feels he's been given a second chance at life, and he intends to make the most of it. That means cherishing every car guy moment, whether it's hunting for parts at a junkyard, chatting with a fellow enthusiast at a cruise night, or researching some obscure engine quirk to talk about in his next video. It also means staying vigilant about his health. Steve has become an advocate for listening to your body. He reminds friends and fans alike not to ignore symptoms like extreme thirst or back pain, as he once did. If his story can prevent even one person from going through a similar ordeal, he'll consider that a win. Steve Magnante's journey over the past couple of years has been nothing short of extraordinary. He went from living his dream in the automotive world to nearly losing it all in a frightening twist of fate, and then with perseverance and the help of an entire community, he fought his way back. Today, Steve stands as a figure of inspiration. His story is a reminder of how quickly life can change and how the power of community and passion can fuel a comeback even from the darkest of days. The young boy who once played with model cars grew up to become a teacher and entertainer to millions of car fans, and when he stumbled, those fans in turn became his support system. As Steve continues to recover and refocus on the road ahead, he does so with profound gratitude. In his emotional thank you video, through tears and smiles, he made a promise: he's not done yet. There are more junkyard crawls to film, more auction commentary to give, more stories to write, and he's eager to get back in the driver's seat, figuratively and literally. With a lifelong love of cars propelling him and an army of supporters cheering him on, Steve is proof that you can't keep a good gearhead down for long. We'll be eagerly watching the next chapter of his career, and the next time you see him on your TV or YouTube screen, you'll know the incredible journey it took to put that trademark Steve smile back on camera. Welcome back, Steve. The automotive world has missed you, and we're all thankful to see you doing what you love again.